there's anything to quit. And I don't think there's anything to restart, which is also probably why I err on the side of Equinox with that campaign. Because to me, it's just like the things that are causing you to quit, if we could really examine them, they're just your life happening.
Let's link up with Krysta on the FYX. She's a wellness coach with a focus on mental well-being and physical strength.
Hey, FYX listeners, welcome back to our latest episode of the FYX podcast. I'm your host, Krysta Huber, and I just have to tell you guys, I had a lot of fun with the episode from a few weeks ago where I reacted to different things I was seeing on social media and in the news. So I think this might be something I revisit 1 to 2 times a month. This month, it's looking like 2 because that's what today's episode is all about. I've been having a few different conversations with friends on social media about things that, of course, with the start of the new year, we're seeing around marketing, around how companies, products, gyms, what have you, are maybe encouraging or even dissuading people from wanting to change. And I have lots to say on it. And one of these topics in particular, I plan to play out from both sides because I could really see it from both sides. And like I said with the body positivity episode, looking forward to getting everybody's feedback because you could really take this either way. However, if we're talking about the news, before we get into anything, I do realize things will change over the course of the next 7 days. And I'm recording this episode like 6 days before it actually drops. But I would be completely inappropriate, out of line, misspoken if I did not acknowledge what is happening in California. As I am recording this, we're only 48 hours into the aftermath and still the tragedy and devastation that is the entire situation with all of these fires in LA. And I want to acknowledge, first and foremost, we have not just listeners and a population of listeners in California, but this podcast, the start of this podcast, the creation of this podcast, the continuation of this podcast every single week would not be made possible without some really incredible people that are based in LA. And I just couldn't record this episode without acknowledging that because my heart truly goes out to everyone who is affected by this in any way. And as I sat here collecting my thoughts, thinking about how I wanted to kick off this episode and talk about what in fact is happening in California, I also would like to thank you, the listener, because the same day that I'm recording this, I also sent out a daily email this morning. And for those of you who are on my email list, you know, I've been sending out emails 5 days a week with the start of the new year, and I'm really enjoying doing that. So hopefully you like seeing my name pop up in your inbox multiple days a week instead of just weekly for our newsletter. But I shared a message this morning that I think is important enough that everyone should hear, and I want to repeat it on the podcast. Typically, the content that I put in my newsletter is a little bit more tongue-in-cheek. It is a little bit more fun. It's calling you out, but I like to think about it as calling you out and calling you up because it's encouraging you to be the best version of yourself. Look at things that maybe you know are not serving you and kind of call you out for potentially changing them. Similar tone that we have on the pod, especially when I'm doing a solo episode. But I took a different take today, and I felt that it was the most important take and the most appropriate take for what we're seeing right now. And I can't even imagine what it feels like to lose your house, to lose your routine. And while this may seem like really small, let's think about that concept of your routine. Imagine just leaving your house with, packing just a few belongings in your car if you have the luxury to get out as quickly as you can, and having no idea if the belongings that you're putting in your car and the clothes that are on your back are literally the only things that you may have left to your name. And 100%, yes, we can replace stuff. And stuff is just things, right? As not eloquently as I said that, it's true. However, think about the routine of like you wanting to go home just to be able to walk down the street, where you take your dog for a walk every morning, where you go to the local coffee shop and you say hey to the barista who makes your coffee the exact way you like it every single morning. And imagine leaving your home, and losing all of those things along with it. It's hard for us to really understand that. And I feel very grateful to have a connection to so many people in LA, because I do think that I get to understand at least a little more closely versus what we're seeing in the media, what we're seeing on Instagram, of just how real the devastation actually is. And I can't really imagine what that actually feels like. And I feel very fortunate to have never been in a situation like that. But I know that any support, any help, any thoughts, any well wishes, any prayers that we can send are very appreciated, extremely, extremely well received. There are so many different ways that you can donate. And I will put links to various organizations down in the show notes for this episode if you feel called to do that. But just know that I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this show and to read what I shared in my newsletter, because the question that I want you to ask yourself as we continue to see the aftermath of this situation is, put yourself in that uncomfortable place. Put yourself inside of those uncomfortable thoughts. And what I want to know is, if you were to lose everything tomorrow, could you get back up, stand up on 2 feet, start a new day, take that deep breath, and remind yourself, at least I have my health? And if you can't say yes to that question, I need this to be your wake-up call. Seeing people lose everything, but again, things that are just material, things that are just stuff. What you really need, if you were to experience something like that, is the physical and mental, especially the mental strength and resilience to know that there will be a new day and this will be a part of your story, but it will be something you can look back on, grow from, even though it's painful, even though it's difficult. And if you tend to forget or take for granted, or maybe convince yourself not to go to the gym, the next time you go to the gym, my challenge to you, if you have that thought, it's January for those of us out here on the East Coast, it is cold. I was saying to a friend the other day, I love the cold. Like, I actually do really like how it feels. I mean, I am the person who will drink iced coffee no matter their temperature, but there's a tipping point for that when it's like bone chilling. And walking around New York City this past week, the wind has been cutting through and feeling like that bone chilling cold. But if you use that as a reason to skip your workout, I want you to remind yourself that your workout is actually so much more than the reps and the sets. It's that physical manifestation and that physical representation and that feeling that you're actually getting inside of pushing yourself to a place of discomfort. If you're lifting heavy enough, if you're pushing hard enough, that ultimately allows you and creates for you the mental fortitude that you need to get through difficult situations. That's why we do hard things. That's why that's become such a slogan, right? So I want to remind you of that. And I want you to really ask yourself, do you respect yourself so much that you take your health that seriously that you don't compromise on the workout? That if you woke up that morning and you made your commitment to yourself that you were going to do it on that day, should you choose to move it, are you then going to stick to it the next day and the next? Same thing goes with your food choices, the nourishing foods that you're choosing to put into your body. Use this unfortunate tragedy as that reminder for you. If you're not that close to it, you can bring yourself close to it by thinking about how you operate in your day to day, knowing that this could technically happen to anybody, anywhere, at any time. Maybe not this exact type of tragedy, but some form of tragedy, because the things in life that are guaranteed are change and are difficult moments. And this happens to be one of the most recent ones that I feel so much sorry and hurt and sadness for these people who have lost so many things. And before I switch tones and topics for the rest of this episode, I wanted to share something that right before I hit record on this, I was scrolling through Instagram just to think about some of the things I wanted to share and give my take on today. I saw this awesome post on one of my follower stories that was actually a screenshot of a post that John Mayer had made. And love John Mayer, great singer, extremely talented. Whatever else you may think about him in terms of his personal life, up to you. Not here to comment on that. But what I think is really important about what he said is he puts it into perspective in terms of those seemingly small things that are actually so unbelievably significant because they're not small at all. So here's what he said. I guess it was a picture of, I didn't see the actual post, but it sounds like from the caption, it was like family photos from his parents and his dad and his dad's entire life. So here's what it says. This is the most valuable thing that I own. It's a folder of photos of my father spanning his life from being a baby, an educator, a husband, and a father. These are the quote unquote documents you read about people taking from their homes. When you hear someone say they've lost everything in a fire, this is much of that everything, if not all of it. Those who say they'll be okay still have these folders and their albums. Those who are inconsolable have lost them. Just behind the immeasurable loss of life is the loss of proof of life. I don't practice prayer, but tonight I will say one for everyone who no longer has these items. It's not about the art and the collectibles. It's the photos, the letters, the class rings, the eyeglasses, and the things we keep to remind us that those we loved were here. May those who have lost so much find some semblance of hope and support from their family and friends. Stay safe, look out for yourself and for one another, and trust that humanity and all it entails, though sometimes hard to see, is alive and well. This is truly devastating. I really don't think I could have said it better. I wish I read that 4 minutes ago because he said it so perfectly. And I think it's important for all of us to just take pause and think about that. And think about the fact that we can help each other, but we can be more effective at helping each other by starting and stopping with ourselves and taking care of ourselves. And that's a reminder, if you listen to last week's episode, for all my ladies out there who have a tendency to take care of everyone else's needs before your own, remember that your ability to take care and your ability to be here for people rides on the fact and is only exponentially increased by when you take care of you. So your order of operations should be about you taking care of yourself, whatever that looks like right now. Okay. Not really a great way to make a transition from that, but in keeping with this idea of reacting to things in the news, reacting to things on social media, I saw a really good post that was actually an advertisement. And I am going to read it again too, from a gym. I'll say what gym it is because I think that gives it context for New Year's and their hot take. I'm going to call it a hot take. I partially agree with it though, on New Year's resolutions. And it was something that a friend of mine shared on her stories, and she gave her take as to how she felt about it. And for as much as I agreed with her, there were certain things that I was like, you know what? I think we could play a little devil's advocate here, because I do find myself really understanding this from both sides. And I also think that we're in a difficult time because we're inundated with so much information and because everyone has to share their opinion about something. I mean, here I am sitting here sharing my opinion about something, but hopefully I can present both sides of it and help you be able to really figure out, you know, where you stand on this, and not even where you stand on this, but how this actually applies to your life. And I'm trying to find it, but of course it's not popping up for me. So let's see. Essentially, the gist of this ad, yeah, it was already on Reddit. So when I Googled it, okay, there's a few different versions of this, but one of them, this isn't the one that I saw, but I do like this one. So I'm going to comment on it too. So if you didn't see these, I'm going to describe them to you. I'm going to read them to you, but it was these ads from Equinox. Equinox is a very popular gym. It is a higher end health club. So presumably, and I think this is important when I give the rest of the context on this one, people who go to this gym, we can make the argument that either they just go to this gym for status and are throwing money away every single month, or they like this gym because they do genuinely care about their health and they see it as an investment. Therefore, they are willing to spend a considerable amount of money per month on a gym membership, because we're not talking about something like a Planet Fitness membership. No knock to that. It's just a completely different pay like investment, I should say, in where you're going to the gym. Could you still get a great workout at both? 1,000% yes. And I don't think that having a nice gym is a prerequisite for your ability to be more in shape. But, you demonstrate what you value and what's important to you based on what you spend money on. So arguably, if you're spending more money on something, I'm going to go ahead and make the assumption that you genuinely care about your health. Now, as an important note in describing all of this, Equinox does not accept new memberships for gyms, any of their gyms, in January. So they did this whole campaign that said things like, "We don't speak January." Another one said, "January thinks it has the whole year ahead of it. We don't speak January." And then this is what I saw on Instagram that I couldn't find. It was part of an ad that looks just like a poster on the street, like something that you would hang up on like a telephone pole. And it says, "January is a language we don't understand. A fantasy delivered to your door in a pastel colored box. It talks about change. It wants you to start something when you should be in the middle of it. It thinks time is on its side. It needs a new outfit before it can begin. Stalling, shortcutting, giving up. We don't speak January." Now, harsh, maybe, but I have to say, I really, really like this campaign. And before you come at me, let me say this. I like this campaign because I personally sent out an email on January 1st, and like the 2 days before January 1st, I did a couple posts on this. So I'm not going to change my tune just because somebody else wrote it in a slightly different way, that basically said this. I didn't say it in such a like teeth cutting kind of tone. And I think, of course, like we didn't hear anybody actually say this. So we're all reading this and taking this interpretation. But I like it because I don't disagree with the fact that, and I'm going to read this part again because I think it's just so important. January is a fantasy delivered to your door in a pastel colored box. It wants you to start something when you should be in the middle of it. And my message, maybe delivered more softly, shall we say, was that you don't need the magic of a calendar to start taking care of your health, to decide to quit the job and pursue a new career path, to really advocate for yourself for that promotion at work, to finally start the business. For my marketing friends out there, to finally get consistent with posting on social media, to stop letting the number of likes dictate whether you'll show up again tomorrow, to choose the foods that are going to help you get closer to your goal, to maybe sometimes say no to certain social events with your friends because it is really important to you to get that good night's sleep. And I don't feel like the, clock striking January 1st should have so much power over us that we then decide, okay, I'm going to start the thing. Now, was it the nicest choice of words for January or for Equinox to say we don't speak January? Maybe not, but here I am sitting talking about it, giving them, technically free publicity. And like they say out there in the world of advertising, even bad press is considered good press because it got us talking about it. But I don't think we should be so quick to knock Equinox for taking this stance. I don't like the idea of being elitist in the gym, especially around this time of year, because, the complaint that a lot of people do dish out that I think is extremely unfair. So hear me when I say this is, oh, the gym's so crowded. And then there's some kind of backhanded comment that's like, yeah, but I know this won't be that crowded for like after 2 weeks from now, as of January 10th, which is dubbed National Quitters Day. I'm getting into that next. So hang on if you want to hear my take on that. But it's important too, if you see somebody in the gym who looks uncomfortable, who looks like they're really trying to find their way, who maybe has not been in there in a long time, if ever, be nice to them. That doesn't mean you need to like go out of your way and potentially ruin your workout either. I'm all for respecting the fact that your workout time is your you time. But I do think it's important that we just, like John Mayer said, if I tie it back to how I started this entire episode, believe in humanity, right? But in believing in humanity and believing in the goodness of people, it's also totally fair for us to just kind of respect the fact that there's like a sanctuary aspect to somebody going to the gym, not wanting it to feel really crowded. And it's a matter of Equinox knowing their audience and knowing that it's very likely that the person who is willing to make that kind of investment in going to the gym may be a little bit bothered by periods where the gym gets a little bit more crowded. Then again, Equinox is very popular in big cities. And guess what? I've been into my share of Equinox gyms, and they're just crowded by nature of the fact that they're small because they don't have as much space. We're not talking about the kind of real estate that you get in suburbs. So quite frankly, I almost think that's a moot point and irrelevant when you consider the fact that depending on what city you're going to this Equinox, you should just get used to the fact that when you go at peak hours, it's going to be crowded. And that may have zero to do with the time of the year. In addition to that, I think that's really their point, that for the people who come to Equinox, for the people that they want to be a part of their community, they're saying, January what? Like you should be in the middle of just continuing on and keeping on with your goals. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I would also challenge that if you disagree with what I'm saying, you have the right to your opinion, but I would also challenge you to dig a little deeper. And if there's something about the fact that this really bothered you, is it bothering you on a personal level because it's calling you out? And if it's calling you out and it's making you feel some kind of way, that's representative of the fact that you have a pattern in your life where you have a tendency to start something thinking that January is going to be the time that you'll kick it into gear. And then for whatever reason, I know the reason, it's life getting in the way, you stop. You push your goals to the side. You tell yourself you'll get to it in a couple weeks. That turns into a couple months. And naturally, other aspects of your life that could be very important, I'm not taking that away from you, start to trump that. Start to trump the commitment you made to yourself to getting into the gym. And that's where I'd then argue, I can't really fault Equinox for the fact that they're just taking a stance on this idea that January shouldn't be so significant. I love a fresh start. I've had a hell of a lot of fresh starts. But when I think back to the last like 5 most significant fresh starts I've had in my life, not one of them began in January. And the date really had like nothing to do with my decision to make a hard choice or change directions with my career or leave a relationship. The reason why I decided to do it was because it wasn't serving me anymore, or the universe thought it wasn't serving me anymore. So it led to circumstances that actually took it out of my life. And if you can get to a place where you look at it like that, where you tell yourself Monday doesn't matter, the start of a new month doesn't matter, the start of a new year doesn't matter, I'm simply going to keep going. That's when you really win for yourself, where you really show yourself that you're calling yourself up. Like I said before, I take the stance of calling you out and then calling you up. And let's just say that maybe this is Equinox kind of calling you out. and not calling people up because it put people on the defense and it made people feel uncomfortable. It made people feel slighted. But I still feel that it's hitting the same undertone and the same theme of what really bugged me about that Instagram post of mine that got deleted, where this person was trying to say that you shouldn't weigh yourself because if you choose to weigh yourself, then you don't respect yourself. Or she technically said she didn't weigh herself because she respects herself. So I questioned if the inverse was true. And that's simply my question right now is if this does bother you enough, can you get to the place where you're actually just saying to yourself, okay, if this bothers me, is this a reflection of me? Or is it, and there's so much validity to this. So I will say this part one more time. Is it just you thinking back to a point in your life where you personally did use January 1st, but you feel emotionally attached to New Year's resolutions in January 1st because you actually found success? And I think that's the difference. I think that the people who are really on the side of like, hey, this campaign was essentially mean. Hey, this campaign was essentially putting people down. You're the person who has that positive emotional attachment because you saw it all the way through. So you're sitting there operating from this place of, I know the power of January 1st. I know the power of New Year's resolutions because I saw them through. But what this ad is really doing in my eyes is just challenging that person to hopefully spring you into action. If you saw this ad and it did get met, as my friend shared with me, with a lot of negative comments in the caption, and depending on your background, and by background, I don't mean like how much you know about fitness, but I mean, maybe we'll call it like your, depending on your health profile, I'd be very curious if most of those comments, because I didn't really study them in particular, and I'd have to go through them for a while. I know the post had a lot of comments. If those comments were coming from people who are people like myself who encourage people to get started and obviously love the thought of January 1st as a reason to get started, or were those comments coming from people who deep down, there's a feeling of, oh, I'm exposed, of, oh, I feel seen, but not seen in a good way because I'm the person who has tried so many times on January 1st. And I'm sitting here saying that I like resolutions, but if I really took a hard critical look for the better, for the purpose of calling myself up to be that better person, of bringing myself to that higher standard, is this sitting with me in a not so comfortable way because I know I am the person who's creating these statistics? Just something to think about. And I hope my intention is for that to land in a very objective way. And I know objectivity is technically bullshit because we all bring our own bias and opinion to the table based on our past experiences, but I mean it from a place of love. And that's really what I should say. I don't mean it from a place of judgment. I just use the word critical or critiquing, but I mean like maybe even really analyzing this for yourself, to ask yourself if your reaction to this is a chance for you to do something different. What I would think would be so powerful is if someone saw that ad campaign, they were pissed off by it, and then this would be so cool. So if anybody out there wants to do this, message me on Instagram at the Krysta Huber. I'm dead serious. I just thought of this, but I will totally support you and I will help you like get some traction on this on Instagram. So seriously, message me. Use that shit as fuel. If it pissed you off and you're like, Equinox is saying all this stuff about how January 1st isn't magic and how January 1st means I should be in the middle of something, well, watch me go create my New Year's resolution and live it out for the rest of this year. That is some good fire to get yourself motivating and doing it from a place where you're taking something that could seem negative, right? For all of the reasons I just described, but doing something positive with it because you're defying the odds. And guess what? It'll feel so much more gratifying. And again, I want to know if you go do this because I want to be able to cheer you on. I want to be able to support you. And I also want you to feel validated from your side. Everyone has a right to come at this from different angles. I'm just saying, can we examine why we're coming at it from the angle that we are? Where is that bias coming from? What story is that connected to in our own life? And for me as a coach who has evolved, when I think back to the days of early coaching experiences where I was new to working with clients, I definitely operated from this place of fear sometimes of not wanting to offend, not wanting to call a client out when that's what they needed. And I like to be direct. I like to say exactly what's on my mind. But I also think it's important to say it with tact, not like you're attacking somebody, and also come at things with compassion and empathy. And I've definitely developed a lot of empathy in the last few years as my life has continued to change, like my personal life, growing a business, things feeling more stressful, being somebody who gained a significant amount of weight in what was a pretty short period of time. I can empathize for what it feels like to be frustrated. I can empathize for wanting to cling to this concept of January 1st of a New Year's resolution being the day that you finally go for it. But I've also grown to become the coach that if it's now January 10th and you're not doing what you said you were going to do, I actually owe it to you. I owe you the service that you're literally paying me for if you're a client of mine to say, hey, the version of you that I spoke to 9 days ago, 10 days ago, 25 days ago, 3 months ago, a year ago, who said they wanted something different for themselves would not operate by making the decisions that you are currently making right now. Can we agree? And that's objective in the sense that, like, that's just rooted in facts. I'm just taking what you told me you said you wanted to do. I'm reconfirming the actions that you told me you wanted to take. And I'm asking you if the future version of you who's pictured yourself as having already lost the weight, as having already gotten the results that you're saying right now that you really, really want, what choice is that person going to make? Are they going to be the person who pursues their resolution all the way through? I think so. Or are they going to be the person who wavers on it, who takes the easier way out when you've had the tough day, when you've had the emotional day, but then starts to justify that being every Friday, every week that you had a busy week at work, every Saturday when you'd like to have a couple extra drinks with your friends? You guys know, if you've been around here for a hot minute, I do not believe in restriction. I do not believe in turning things down on your social calendar. I do not believe in even, pausing your grind when it comes to your professional goals, because sometimes you're going to go through a period where you say, hey, yeah, I want to make that money. And do I miss a couple gym sessions because I have certain things that I put into my schedule, that I put in my calendar? Yeah, that's going to happen. But the more and more I've coached and the more I've helped people get results, the more information that's naturally given me to be able to make better decisions about what tonality, what questions, what angle to take with clients to help them get to the end result that they are legitimately paying me for by being inside of the Fitness Fix community. And I make that promise to you, even if it's going to make you uncomfortable. I would go so far as to say that as a coach, if I don't make you uncomfortable, I don't know that I did my job. I think I'm kind of serving you softballs. And that's not really what, that to me is me not taking my relationship with you, coach to client, seriously enough. So that's my hot take on that. To bring this one home, and it ties directly into this whole conversation around this campaign and talking about dates and New Year's resolutions, is I just learned this week that January 10th, so just a few days prior to this episode airing, is considered National Quitters Day. Guys, I hate that. Like, genuinely hate with a capital H. I know it's coming from statistical data and the fact that it was studied that people tend to commit to their New Year's resolutions from January 1st to January 10th, or technically January 9th. And January 10th is the day that statistically most people quit, or the highest number of people quit. It's the longest that people tend to make it. And I think that's ridiculous. I hate it because it's absurd to me that we've given it a name. But of course, we've given it a name because in the world of social media and us wanting to cling to something, identify with something, we have to give it some sort of name. And I don't like the fact that we're giving it a name, because to me, it makes me think of holidays. And there is absolutely nothing to celebrate about quitting unless you're quitting a job that you hate, unless you're leaving a relationship that was no good for you, or unless you're like a 10-year-old kid who is entering the winter season of sports now and deciding that instead of playing basketball, you're going to swim. Those would be good reasons to quit. But calling this, I keep wanting to say the word commemorate because I feel like labeling it, that's what I should say, labeling it as National Quitters Day is ridiculous. Like, that's crazy. And it's even crazier because with the philosophy that I take when it comes to fitness and nutrition, I don't think there's anything to quit. And I don't think there's anything to restart, which is also probably why I err on the side of Equinox with that campaign. Because to me, it's just like the things that are causing you to quit, if we could really examine them, they're just your life happening. And I want to describe this a little more specifically by giving you an example that has come up for me a few times in the past week, because of course it is the new year. I have more people reaching out to me wanting to join the Fitness Fix community. So excited to welcome them in. But one of the things that I ask on every sales call that I have with a client is, help me understand your schedule and help me understand your patterns. And the reason why I want to understand that is because this is not your first rodeo with dieting. And the things that have caused you to, quote unquote, fall off the wagon, those things are actually life events, like work, like responsibilities with your kids, like tragic situations, like a death in the family, legitimate things. So when I ask clients, especially potential ones, but even clients currently, to help them identify what's not serving them, I ask them to take me back to a time when they did lose weight and ask them what's different about their life now versus where it was then. And that's because it immediately switches their brain to recognizing that it wasn't so much about the diet. It wasn't so much about tracking their food. It wasn't so much about the macros. It was about all of the other roadblocks and twists and turns that were preventing them from utilizing the tools. And yes, maybe the tools that they were using weren't the best tools. So then it became even easier to let those roadblocks trump the ability to stick to the plan. So I have a responsibility as a coach to help you come up with what I like to call the minimum effective dose. What is the simplest path forward? What is the easiest list of adjustments we can make to your routine? What are things we can add? What are a few things we can subtract, but really focusing on the adding to make it feel like something that is abundant rather than lacking for you, to help you get to your end result that you desire without asking you to do a 180 within like this 9-day period. Because the people doing the 180 in the 9-day period, I guarantee, without looking at these statistics or diving into them any further, but if I were to interview all the people who only make it to January 10th, whatever path they picked was probably very extreme. So my advice to not quitting is to think about minimum effective dose. And I had a new client who shared with me what her work schedule was like, and she has a whole lot going on top of some other things that she's dealing with in terms of her health that are a little more complex, that do require a few more sacrifices and compromises, as I like to call them, in order for her to get the results that she wants. But more importantly, to truly get to the root cause and fix the things that are making her gain weight and just make her not feel well. So she sent me a message And I asked her, just checking in after the first few days, how have the first few days been going? She happened to get a cold and she wasn't feeling super great. So I reminded her, focus on sleep, hydrating, getting some extra supplements in to get those vitamins and, your micronutrients, all that good stuff. But started to feel better within, 2 days of us having that conversation. And then she messaged me and told me that the day got really busy. She had a lot of things going on at work. She had to go to her second job after work. But she sent me a plate of some food that was a combination of protein, carbs, and fats, all whole food sources, and mentioned that she hit a quick 10-minute Peloton workout. That is finding solutions that fit into your schedule. I was so proud to hear that. And where the coaching opportunity came in for me was that she mentioned that this day was so crazy. And I feel like I didn't get my week off to the best start because I wasn't feeling well. And that caused me to not really be as prepared, didn't go to the grocery store. And then I got busier and busier as the week went on. So I said to her, I was like, this is perfect. And you might be like, what do you mean? How could that possibly be perfect? I'm not doing the things as effectively as I could be. It's perfect because now we know her roadblocks. Now we know that if we don't go to the grocery store on Sunday, what's the domino effect? What's the downstream effect of that? That if we don't go to the grocery store on Sunday, that by Wednesday or Thursday, we're kind of scraping by and feeling like we're just going through the motions and maybe not making the best choices. Maybe that's the moment that turns into, DoorDash sounds like a really good plan tonight, or I'm just going to pick some food up on the way home instead of actually making something. And that's where fat loss gets to be really simple for you, because what we identified is this doesn't have to do with your food choices. This doesn't even have to do so much with your relationship with food. This, to a degree, doesn't directly have to do with your busy schedule. It does. But knowing that you have that busy schedule, this all comes back to the fact that you didn't go to the grocery store. And if we know that now, we can start to set some guidelines of, hey, going to the grocery store on this specific day and buying these particular foods that don't require a lot of prep that I can throw together quickly, that's my non-negotiable. And when you operate from that place of looking for these solutions and really getting down to the specifics of what the problem is or what choice led you to find yourself in a situation that you don't like, what are we quitting? You don't need to quit anything. You just keep going. You pivot. Maybe we should name it National Pivot Day. It doesn't sound very good, but I don't think National Quitters Day sounds much better. But how about we pivot and adjust the game plan? Adjust the timeline that you set for yourself to getting to where you want to go. If you can get behind that, then I want you inside of the Fitness Fix community. I want you inside of our world. I want to support you. I want to help you get to your goals. So shoot me a message or apply for one-on-one coaching. The link is also down in the show notes. I appreciate you guys, and I'll be back next week.